The storm raged across the darkened sky, lightning slashing through the clouds, illuminating the monstrous silhouette descending through the rain. The Zard warship hovered just above the shoreline, its colossal form blotting out the moonlight. A mechanical growl vibrated through the air as its red-lit sensors scanned the terrain below. The waves crashed violently beneath its hovering bulk, displaced by the sheer force of its arrival. The ship wasn't designed for subtlety. It was a declaration of conquest. The Zarth Dominion had arrived. Inside the warship, Commander Clitho stood before the viewing pane, arms crossed. The data streams flickered in alien script, detailing the advancing human forces. It was a curious sight. Infantry. No armored vehicles, no aerial support, no visible heavy artillery. Just soldiers. Even now, his officers whispered in confusion. The primitive species should have been retreating, not closing the distance. Their weapons were outdated, their numbers laughable, yet they advanced, unwavering. "They know this is futile," an officer muttered, studying the readings. Commander Clithos remained silent. He had studied humanity more than most. They were reckless, driven by emotions, and yet resilient, a species that refused to surrender, even when logic dictated they should. He had witnessed planetary sieges where superior forces overwhelmed lesser civilizations in days. Humanity, however, had held. Their worlds burned, yet they fought tooth and nail, clawing impossible odds with unshakable tenacity. A new alert pulsed through the command deck. The humans were less than a kilometer away, still advancing. At the base of the cliffs, Alpha 9 moved through the storm, boots sinking into the soaked earth. Captain Rourke crouched behind a ridge, visor scanning the warship's underside. The mission was simple. Get inside, cripple the ship, make the Zarth regret ever setting foot on Earth. He turned to Diaz, the squad's tech specialist. "Find us a way in." Diaz knelt, tapping rapidly on his wrist console. "Give me a second." There, maintenance hatch, 15 meters ahead. Sergeant Carter tightened her grip on her rifle. "You sure that thing isn't trapped?" Diaz smirked. "Only one way to find out." They moved swiftly, using the storm as cover. Rain drummed against their armor as they pressed forward, rifles sweeping the landscape. The warship loomed above, an unnatural presence against the chaos of the storm. The sheer size of it sent a chill down Rourke's spine. This wasn't just an invasion force. It was extermination in motion. "Keep it quiet," he murmured, pressing against the cold metal of the ship's hull. Diaz worked fast, bypassing the hatch's security protocols. The Zarth weren't expecting infiltration from ground forces. They relied too much on technological superiority. That was their first mistake. The hatch hissed open. Rourke motioned his team forward. One by one, they slipped inside. The air inside was thick with sterile metallic tang. Dim red lighting pulsed along the corridors, casting long shadows that flickered as the squad moved. Every footstep was careful, every breath controlled. The walls hummed with energy, the ship's vast systems working in perfect mechanical synchrony. The Zarth didn't build for aesthetics. Everything was functional, efficient, soulless. Diaz checked the scanner. No movement. "We're clear, so far." Rourke nodded and gestured forward. They advanced, keeping close to the walls, weapons at the ready. Carter's grip tightened around her rifle. They all knew the quiet wouldn't last. A distant thrum echoed through the corridors. Machinery, life support, something else. The sound wasn't entirely mechanical. It had an organic undertone, like a heartbeat muffled by steel. They pushed forward, turning a corner into a vast chamber. The sight stopped them cold. Rows of containment pods lined the walls, their translucent surfaces fogged with condensation. Inside, figures twitched in uneasy sleep. Not prisoners. Test subjects. Human, some barely alive, others too still. Their bodies bore the marks of experimentation. Scarred flesh, cybernetic implants, signs of forced mutation. Diaz exhaled sharply. "What the hell?" Rourke moved to the nearest pod. A man inside stirred, eyes fluttering open. Bloodshot, hollow. His lips moved, forming words too faint to hear. Rourke leaned in. "They fear you. Before he could respond, a warning klaxon blared through the ship. The Zarth knew they were here. The chamber's lighting shifted from dim red to a blinding white. Doors hissed open. Heavy footsteps pounded toward them. Contact! Carter barked, rifle snapping up. Zarth warriors stormed into room, their movements fluid, unnatural. They weren't like other species the squad had fought. These creatures move with eerie precision, their bodies adapting to the fight before it even began. The first shot rang out, then another. The chamber erupted into chaos. Muzzle flashes illuminated the pods, casting erratic shadows. Carter dropped two before they could react. Diaz ducked behind cover, unloading a burst of gunfire that sent another reeling. Rourke moved fast, putting 3 rounds into a Zarth warrior's chest. It staggered but didn't fall. Not until he put another in its skull. Diaz tapped at his wrist console furiously. They locked us in, trying to override. Carter switched to her sidearm, emptying a magazine into an approaching warrior before slamming a fresh one in. Anytime now, Diaz. The Zarth fell, but more kept coming. Faster, smarter, learning, adapting. Then a low vibration ran through the walls. The lights flickered. A distant explosion rocked the ship. Diaz grinned. Got it. Doors open, move. They sprinted into the corridor, sealing the bulkhead behind them. The ship was waking up, but so was its greatest weakness. It didn't expect them to survive this long, and it had no idea what came next. The corridor ahead pulsed with warning lights. The ship was adapting, sealing pathways, shifting interior layouts to contain them. Rourke didn't slow down. They had to keep moving. If they stopped, they died. Diaz checked his wrist console. Their rerouting power, trying to box us in. Carter glanced behind. Let them try. The next junction split into 3 paths. The ship was herding them toward the center, away from critical systems. Rourke wasn't about to play along. He knelt, motioning Diaz forward. Ventilation system. Find me a way to bypass their lockdown. Diaz worked fast. The schematic flickered on his screen. There's a maintenance shaft. Lead straight to power distribution. Carter smirked. Cut the power, cut their advantage. Rourke nodded. Do it. The grate came loose with a sharp snap. One by one, they slipped inside. The passage was tight, barely enough room to move. The heat was oppressive, thick with the scent of burnt ozone. Diaz led the way, following the map's dim glow. Every few meters, the walls vibrated with the ship's shifting defenses. Then came the sound. A clicking. Rapid, deliberate, not mechanical. Carter's hand shot up. Something's in here with us. Rourke unholstered his knife. Bullets were useless in close quarters. The sound grew closer. A shadow moved ahead, barely visible in the dim red glow. Then, without warning, it lunged. Rourke caught a glimpse. Thin limbs, razor-sharp appendages, too many joints bending the wrong way. He drove the knife forward, sinking it deep into the creature's neck. It screeched, thrashing, acidic blood hissing against the metal walls. Diaz kicked its twitching body down the shaft. That wasn't standard infantry. Carter wiped her blade on her sleeve. They're adapting. No one spoke as they pressed forward. Minutes later, they reached the end of the shaft. Diaz pried open the panel, dropping into a dimly lit control room. Consoles lined the walls, alien symbols shifting rapidly as the ship adjusted to their presence. Rourke stepped forward, shut it down. Diaz's fingers flew across the interface. Sparks erupted as the system fought back. The ship was resisting, treating Diaz like a virus trying to overwrite its core functions. Carter stood guard, rifle raised. Make it quick. The screens flickered. Then, everything went dark. The low hum of the ship's system sputtered and died. Emergency power kicked in, but it wasn't enough to keep up with the ship's evolving defenses. Then the alarms changed. No longer a warning. Something else. Diaz grinned. They're blind. Rourke tightened his grip on his rifle. Good. Let's finish this. The silence was brief. Then came the shift metal groaning, walls realigning. The ship wasn't just adapting anymore. It was panicking. Systems flickered erratically. corridors reconfiguring at random. The Zarth had never lost control like this before. They didn't know how to handle it. That was their weakness. They saw war as a calculated equation. The human factor? Unpredictable. Diaz checked his scanner. We need to move. This whole section is collapsing. Carter nodded, reloading. Which way? Rourke studied the emergency schematics. Core chamber. If we take it out, the whole ship goes down. They ran. The floor vibrated beneath them. Power conduits sparking overhead. The Zarth weren't trying to stop them anymore. They were trying to contain them. Barricades slammed shut behind them. Entire hallways locking down. Then, just ahead, the bulkhead to the core chamber hissed open. A figure stood waiting. Commander Clithos. Rourke halted, raising his rifle. Clithos didn't move. The alien commander regarded them with something almost resembling curiosity. You are different. His voice was deep, layered, translated through unseen speakers. We have fought countless species. They break. You do not. Rourke didn't lower his weapon. That's your problem. You think war is about numbers. Strategy. Logic. Clithos tilted his head. It is... Carter stepped forward. No, it's about will. And you don't have what it takes to win. Clithos exhaled, a low clicking sound. Perhaps, but neither will you. The walls behind him shifted, revealing rows of Zarth elites. Taller, stronger, adapted for battle. Each one moved with inhuman precision, their weapons humming to life. Rourke didn't hesitate. Light them up. The fight was brutal. The first Zarth went down in a hail of gunfire, but the others pushed forward. Carter emptied a full clip into one, barely slowing it. Diaz fired from cover, picking off weak points. Clithos moved through the chaos, untouched. His species had spent centuries perfecting their combat forms. Against any other enemy, they would have been unstoppable. But humans weren't predictable. Rourke pivoted, drawing his blade. He lunged, driving it deep into Clithos' side. The alien staggered, eyes wide in shock. Not at the wound, but at the audacity, the refusal to accept the odds. Diaz triggered the core overload. The chamber filled with warning sirens. Rourke leaned in, voice low. Welcome to humanity. He wrenched the blade free, and Clithos collapsed. The team ran. The ship was dying, its systems imploding. They reached the evac point just as the first explosions tore through the hull. The storm outside swallowed the wreckage, fire and lightning blending into the night. They watched as the warship fell, crashing into the ocean. Carter exhaled. Think they got the message? Rourke stared at the burning remains. They will